Welcome to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. Today, we're going to be talking about the flood business with Brad Hubbard, owner and civil engineer with National Flood Experts. Learn more at nationalfloodexperts.com. And for people that are living in the the state of Florida, I should say, they're concerned about what's going on with flood insurance because there's some stuff sitting out there that's unsettled, with regard to flood insurance, the elevation of your home. Are you going to have to pay for flood insurance? Do you not have to pay for flood insurance? Brad's going to be here today to help us clear up some of these concerns that you may be having or should be having if you're not in the know. So Brad, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Jamie.
So tell us a little bit about your company and what it is that you do.
Sure. National Flood Experts is a civil engineering company, and what we do is work to really fix errors in flood zone maps. When FEMA does their maps, they work with local communities, and they look at the whole area. We come in and look property by property, and our goal is to get people removed from the flood zone so they're no longer required to carry flood insurance.
So the bottom line, if you're below a certain elevation, you've got to have flood insurance. But what you're doing, or where you're helping, is you're saying that FEMA has put these maps out on a community basis, not individually. And
Sure.
So you're coming into each homeowner and saying, listen, I know that you said this entire community is in a flood zone, but this person is actually, a couple inches higher than, the base flood elevation. To what level of success do you have, and do you know ahead of time if you're going to be successful or not? Are you able to guarantee that you
Sure.
can get it removed?
Yeah, and basically in our studies over the last 5 or 6 years, 50% of the properties that we review are incorrectly zoned. It's about half the time we can help. There are areas where we don't have much success, South St. Pete, things like that, but other areas that we have very, very high success, 70, 80%. We can look at a property and 100% guarantee whether or not we can get it out. All of our services are guaranteed.
I mean, you're in the numbers business. I mean,
Exactly.
The numbers don't lie. You go out there, however you measure the elevation, I don't know how the elevation's measured, but boom, you can't lie with the numbers, or you can't argue with the numbers. And so you present that to FEMA, and do they give you much pushback on it? Do they say, well, we're going to send our own people out there to measure?
Not at all. They sort of trust us as professionals
Okay.
to help them make the maps more accurate. That's why this process exists, is to help the people that shouldn't be required to carry flood insurance. They recognize that their maps are a little antiquated and it's difficult to be accurate on such a small scale. So they have this tool for us to use as civil engineers to help them make it more accurate and obviously help out the client.
So what's involved in the service? If I call you to my house, do you spend an afternoon over there measuring? How long does it, first off, does it take to determine my elevation?
Sure.
Take me through the process.
Absolutely. Truth is, most of the time we don't even have to go to the property.
Okay.
If the property owner, whether it's residential or commercial, has an elevation certificate or a survey on the property showing elevations, we can review that, check it with the flood data that we have, and within a couple of hours, we can tell them yes or no whether we can get them out. So the process, we would either, let's say that we could get you out. The process then, we go under contract, we can get you out, and then about 2 to 3 weeks later, we have a letter from FEMA stating that your home, your structure, your business, whatever it is, no longer in the flood zone, you're no longer required to carry flood insurance. You can get a refund of your current flood insurance premium that you paid 9 months ago or whenever it was. And that's it. It takes about a month for the whole process.
So a survey is not necessarily an elevation certificate. An elevation certificate is something that you can add on to a survey, correct?
Yes. Typically, when you get a survey when you're purchasing a
Right.
home, it's a property boundary survey, and there's no elevation data.
Right,
It's
I'm saying,
just
so it's
bearings and
something that's
distances.
related to a survey that
Right.
you can get added on. But nonetheless, that elevation certificate then will give you the exact elevation,
Absolutely.
and then you can then compare it to, are you being charged flood insurance? And so I guess somebody could then compare the numbers and say, hey, I shouldn't be getting charged flood insurance,
Right.
but they can't fix that themselves. They got to call an engineering firm such as yourselves to get it to rectify, correct?
That's sort of the process. And I actually wrote a book on how for homeowners to be able to do it themselves if they want to sort of navigate those waters. But that's what we do. We take the elevation information, we take the flood information, and prove to FEMA, hey, look, in your 100-year storm, in the flood event, this property is not going to flood. They have almost zero pushback. Lenders have zero pushback because they, conform to all the FEMA requirements. And that's
Do flood zones ever change? I mean, if you're in flood zone X, are you always going to be in flood zone X, which is the one that you want to be in, which means you're in a low chance of flooding?
Correct. They change. Each community changes their maps. Every 10 to 15 years is about average. 15 years is probably average. There's some maps right now, like Palm Beach County over on the other coast. They're still using a map from 1981, whereas Pinellas County is 2002, Hillsborough County is 2008, but they change about every 10 to 15 years. They move some people into higher risk, some people into lower risk, but it's always changing just the topography changes over a 15-year period of time.
Now in Florida, I'm used to seeing flood zone A, AE, and X, and then X500. On a national level, how many different flood zones are there? Is that all of them, or are there more just in other areas that are higher elevations?
There's really three.
Okay.
There's X, which is low risk. That could be X or X500. That means you're not required to carry flood insurance. You have what they call a low risk or a less than 1% chance of flooding. There's AE, or any A zone, which is basically anyone who they think will have a higher risk of flooding, but it's not coastal. And then there's V zones, which is coastal. That's anyone within usually about 300 feet of a coastline. The V stands for velocity.
Okay, there's not a flood zone A by itself.
There is A.
There is A. So A and AE. What's their name? A and AE?
There's AE just means that they have a base flood elevation determined for that area. A means they don't have one. So A means we're going to flood, but we're not exactly sure how high it's going to flood. AE means it's going to flood to elevation 9 or 27 or whatever it is.
Okay, so flood, anything with an A in front of it, though, is going to require that you have flood insurance.
Correct.
The flood zone V, which is, if you're on the water, you should obviously expect to have flood insurance.
Absolutely.
X is where you want to be ideally to save that cost. The X500, was that the 500-year storm then?
Yep. That means that you have somewhere between a 1% and a 0.2% chance of flooding. So
have we had any of those 100-year storms in the last 100 years that have affected flood zone X?
Yes. I mean, there was, last year we had 2 100-year storms.
Really? Which ones were they? Were they associated with hurricanes?
They weren't.
Okay.
They were just major storms, sort of like we're having right now.
Right.
They were major storms over a 24, 36-hour period of time, and we would get the amount of rain that they consider to be a 100-year storm.
But somebody in flood zone X could still get flood insurance.
Absolutely.
Is it at a greatly reduced premium? Is it
yes.
something that, is there any rules of thumb that you would recommend somebody in flood zone X get flood insurance? What's your rule of thumb?
There's not really a rule of thumb. Except, FEMA will tell you everywhere in Florida is a flood zone, you should have it. I kind of agree with that, but there are some areas when you get in the middle. If you're within a mile of a coast, you should really have, I'm in an X zone, I have flood insurance.
Right.
It's $450 for the year to cover my entire home. So it's really not that expensive. But I'm only about a half a mile from a bay, which that's really going to be the only way we're going to flood is if we have a hurricane pushing water up. But for $400 to cover your entire home and the occurrence that happened, it's really not that expensive when you're in X zone. The AE and V is expensive.
Let's talk about how the flood insurance program works. First
Yes.
off, the NFIP administered by FEMA. This is a national program. That's one
Correct.
reason why flood insurance is different. There's not private carriers for flood, or are there private carriers for flood? Explain the market.
Sure, that's sort of changing right now. The NFIP was created by the government and FEMA to provide flood insurance back in the 70s. It's evolved now to where they're trying to create a market for private companies to come in to sort of take away a little bit of the risk that they're incurring. That's what they're sort of dealing with right now with the legislation. FEMA actually needs to be reauthorized by September 30th of this year, or the NFIP program goes away, which would be devastating to real estate.
Does that mean flood insurance goes away, period?
It means that anyone who's trying to write a new policy, if there's no NFIP in effect, they cannot get flood insurance.
What about existing policies? Those
They'll stay in effect, but they can't. If your renewal is on October 1st and they don't reauthorize NFIP, they can't renew your policy because there is no flood insurance program. So even if there's a day lapse coming to that, there will be some serious trickle-down effects.
Okay, so this is due to hit the fan in September, you said?
September 30th of
September
this year.
30th. I haven't been hearing about this in the media. Of course, we keep hearing about Russia all the time.
Yeah.
We keep hearing about all the drama stuff. I want to hear about this. So what's the scuttle on the streets about what's going to happen with this?
They're working hard to come up with something that makes sense. I actually had a roundtable discussion with Charlie Crist 2 weeks ago down in Gulfport. He wanted information from some different stakeholders, people that understand it, to figure out what needs to be done. What do we want to see come September? But there are several different groups in the Senate and House that are trying to come up with a plan that makes sense so that we don't have the same Biggert Waters debacle we had in 2012, something that isn't going to destroy homeowners and business owners, but will still allow the NFIP to provide flood insurance for.
And a big problem with the National Flood Insurance Program and what Biggert Waters, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the second segment, was looking to correct, was making things more in line with actuarial risks. So somebody in Denver, Colorado isn't paying a higher premium because I'm living there on the beaches of St. Petersburg, right? They're
Right.
essentially supplementing our higher risk when we should be paying higher premiums, and they shouldn't be paying hardly anything at all, correct?
That's the idea behind it. In actuality, it doesn't quite work that way. You know, nothing in insurance does, especially with flood, just because there's no. It's not like fire where you can say, hey, 1% of homes are going to have a fire every 5 years. You know, it's a much more catastrophic event that happens every once in a while. But that was the theory, was to make everyone pay what they're supposed to be paying. But the problem was that you'd run into these homes that were built in 1950. It's a $200,000 home and they have $9,000 of flood insurance. It's like, you can't live like that. So it doesn't make any sense. Even though they may have never had a flood in 65 years,
and the reason why the flood insurance was nationalized is because when there's a flood, it's not like a house getting hit by a tree where the insurance company's just got to deal with that one home.
Exactly.
They've got to deal with the city of homes that have been flooded. And so, I mean, the average private carrier would probably go out of, they would just declare bankruptcy when that happens. Federal government, obviously, well, they could, but they're not going to declare federal bankruptcy. Correct.
And that was, you know, that's why it was taken on originally. It's because no private insurer wanted to take on that risk because of exactly what you said. When you have an event, it's $1 billion loss. It's a $15 billion loss, and that's tough to take. But they've worked with different ways to make it more feasible, to bring in the private market to be able to take away portions of that risk.
Currently talking to Brad Hubbard. He is the owner of National Flood Experts and a civil engineer. Learn more at nationalfloodexperts.com, where they can help get your home outside of the flood zone there and save you that premium on flood insurance, given that you qualify, you know, above the base elevation that we were talking about there in the beginning. Coming back from the break, I want to talk about the Bigger Waters Act, which was, you know, all in the news about 3 or 4 years ago, about to come back into the news here again soon. So if you're living in South Tampa or St. Petersburg, you definitely want to stay tuned and catch what we have to say, what he has to say about the Bigger Waters Act and how it may or may not affect your home. So you're listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products, hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
we're back to That Business Show 2.0, where business becomes show business. Talking about flood insurance today with Brad Hubbard. He is the owner of National Flood Experts. Learn more at nationalfloodexperts.com. And Brad, I'm a real estate agent. Flood insurance, costs, make and break some of these deals. And when I started in broadcasting 4 years ago, I used to do the show, Jamie Maloney Real Estate Show, and the Bigger Waters Act was all in the news. His flood insurance premiums going to rise in the flood zones in Florida. First off, take us through what the Bigger Waters Act was meant to do and why it was tabled and what's on the horizon.
Okay. First, it was brought into play to make everyone pay what they're supposed to be paying. And it was sort of touted as, we're going to make all these people who have a lot of money who live on the water pay what they should be paying. The problem is that, as we know in this area, there are a ton of homes by the water that these aren't $1 million mansions. These are $150,000 homes, $200,000 homes. And the fallout from, taking away the subsidies was $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 policies, which were forcing people out of their homes. They obviously changed that and repealed it and started with the Flood Insurance Affordability Act, aptly named. But, and then now here in 2017, we have to reauthorize the NFIP and make any changes that we want to make now for the 5 years going forward.
And so basically all the homes in Pinellas County, St. Petersburg, are going to be impacted. Homes in South Tampa, homes that were built mostly before 1970 when people started paying attention to the flood zones, they're going to be getting hit with 2, 3, 4, and even higher time premium increases on their insurance, which would have put a lot of people on the streets because they wouldn't have been able to afford that.
Correct. That's what Bigger Waters was going to do. And the good news is they're not talking about doing that with this reauthorization. They're talking about basically keeping what we've had for the last 5 years, which is not a great system, but it's better than the Bigger Waters for those pre-1971 homes that you're talking about. They're talking about basically keeping everything that we have, increasing private options, but to minimize the major impacts. But you're still going to be looking at the 20% increases and the things that make flood insurance very unaffordable. So
for people that are in flood zones A, V, AE, all those things that begin with the A, there's probably going to be some sort of increase. What's the time frame to see some type of an increase? And has it been passed through the House and Senate and all that stuff yet?
None of it has been even offered up as a bill to be voted on yet. They're still in the...
But the bill as it was presented 5 years ago, that's off the table right now, so we're not worried about tripling the cost. If anything, 20%, or even no type of increase is good, but
sure, yeah.
Nonetheless, I'd rather 20% than 3 times. So.
And that's what we're looking at is probably more of that 20% a year increases until people go out and get an elevation certificate on their property to figure out what they should be paying. That's kind of what we do is to help people to. You've got a $3,000 flood insurance bill. How can we help? That's every single day I'm helping people figure that out.
Right.
But with the legislation coming, it shouldn't be anything drastically changed. It should be just situation normal, even though it's still those 20% increases.
But this is good information for people that may be looking for a home right now to be looking at what flood zone that they may be purchasing in. I know I've worked with a number of hedge funds and investment groups that come into our area and buy for rental use. That's one of their criteria. We only buy flood zone X. So if it's got an A, they don't buy it, period.
Exactly.
So it affects the value, and they buy a lot. And so you have 2 comparable homes, but they won't touch the one in flood zone AE.
Right, and there's a statistic that came out during the whole Bigger Waters thing from NAR, from National Association of Realtors, that for every $500 of flood insurance premium that you're required to carry on your home, it decreases the value by $10,000.
Wow.
So if you've got $1,500 in flood insurance and your house is worth $30,000 less than your neighbor who doesn't have to pay it.
Wow, I'd never heard that statistic.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I'll definitely be putting that one out there and looking into that one just a little bit more for myself because, like I said, I'm a real estate agent. I need to know that type of information. What about for people that are below the flood elevation level? Can they manually raise the home? Can they do anything to bring it up?
There are things you can do. It's usually not. It's cost prohibitive usually to come in, lift up a home, put 2 feet of fill underneath it, and then set the home back down. It doesn't really make sense unless you've had multiple flood claims, in which case FEMA will actually come in and pay you to raise your home up. But there are things that you can do, especially on the commercial side. There's flood proofing, there's flood venting, there's lots of things that you can do to make the situation better, either less of a risk or to pay less in premiums.
So how did you find this business? You go to school for civil engineering? Did you work in another line of engineering and then saw the opportunities in the flood business? Talk to me about this.
My story, my little roundabout story is it's kind of interesting. I worked in engineering for about 12 years, grew to hate it. Wanted to try something else, and my wife's cousin was actually like, why don't you try insurance? So I started with him, worked in insurance for a couple years, and found that the insurance agents didn't really understand flood. They didn't really like doing flood insurance. So I ended up doing a lot of flood insurance policies. And as I was looking at him, I started looking at him as an engineer, as not an insurance agent. And the mortgage company is saying, you have to carry flood insurance on this. And I'm looking at this going, why? This is never going to flood, or if it does, the entire state's gone. So I actually called FEMA and said, hey, look, here's the situation. The mortgage company is requiring them to carry flood insurance. What can I do? And they're like, well, if you know a professional engineer, they can do this. I was like, I'm a professional engineer.
Nice.
She goes, okay, do this. So 3 days later, I had that client out of the flood zone. They never had to pay flood insurance again. They kept it, but I think they paid $330 as opposed to $1,600.
Right.
So, and that just sort of started the wheels turning.
So a little bit of an accidental entrepreneurism.
It was, absolutely.
It fell into your lap there with an opportunity, and so you started the business. How long have you been running this business?
I've been doing this work for about 5 years now. That
And
first policy was about 5 years ago.
Is it kind of just, wash, rinse, repeat, the same process? I mean, because it seems like, okay, here's the elevation, here, let me submit this. It comes back, okay. Is there a lot of differentiation, or is this kind of just the same process over and over?
Probably 80 to 90% is the same process over and over. That 10, 20% is something new, something, this situation is just a little bit different. And it's fun for me because I get to try,
And so how are you compensated? Do you just charge the homeowner a flat fee and
yeah,
go from
for
there?
homeowners, it's a flat fee. For commercial, it's a percentage of savings. It's basically, we don't make any money unless we're able to save our clients more.
So if it gets denied, you're not going to charge the homeowner?
No fee at all.
Okay.
We review everything for free, and everything's 100% guaranteed. So on our side, it costs our clients nothing at the end of the day. They'll make money on us day one.
Right.
But it's entirely risk-free.
And you're saying when you look at them, you can guarantee without a doubt that you send it into FEMA, they're going to come back and then they're going to say, all right, no more flood insurance. And then at what point they pick up the phone, they call their insurance company and they say, here's something from FEMA, I'll wipe off the insurance from my my plan, and it's as simple as that?
Pretty much. We are 99% successful once we say yes. Every once in a while we'll miss something. It happens, and we'll refund the money. But then once we're out, then we sort of work with them on how to go about either changing their policy to a preferred policy, keep it at that $400 rate, cancel the policy. We work with them through their lender, through their insurance agent, to go through that whole process to go from us to money back in their hands.
So what is your predictions down the road for the flood insurance? Do you think FEMA is going to continue to stand on a national flood insurance program? Do you think it'll become more privatized over the coming years? What do you see down the line for flood?
My prediction is that FEMA is going to stay because there are a lot of risks that other companies, private companies, won't want to take. Sort of how Citizens was for the home insurance. But I see that private coming in a lot more over the next 5 years. Truth is, flood insurance makes a lot of money. Last year, the state of Florida paid $960 million in flood insurance premiums, and they only paid out $17 million in claims. So they made $950 million on the state of Florida with a 1.7% claim ratio, or whatever the numbers are. So there's a lot of money in flood. So private companies are starting to come around. I think that it will become more competitive on the private side to help out homeowners, to help out business owners. But FEMA is not going anywhere.
Now, you wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about your book.
The book's called Flood Money, and it's basically a guide on how to navigate this process on your own. It can be a little boring because it's written by an engineer. It's almost a technical manual, but it's a comprehensive guide on how flood insurance works, why the government's doing it, and what you can do about it. And even if we can't get you out, here's another 11, 12 things that you can do that might be able to help you either lower your risk, save some money, things like that.
So what's it like being a business owner and an engineer? Engineers usually go to school to work, in technical jobs, get their hands dirty, not run the business so much. Your mindsets are usually on fixing, some complex problem, not the business side of things. What's it like being a business owner and with an engineering mindset?
I think that the reason I didn't like engineering, the reason I got out of engineering is because I'm not a typical engeneer.
Okay, so you were just in the wrong spot. It's not the other way around.
Exactly. So I'll find myself just wanting to go sit in a cubicle and work, but that's not my personality. And I, being a business owner and engineer, while I'm not as great on some of the administration side, but it's a lot of fun. It's a fun process. And
so where are the opportunities in this business for yourself? Where do you see National Flood Experts in 5 years, or are you in the right niche right now with what you're doing?
Sure. The only thing that I see over the next 5 years is just expanding. The fact that there are over 5 million flood insurance policies in the country, and we can help half. There's 2 million clients across the country that we can help, either to get removed from the flood zone, to save money on flood insurance. So in 5 years, I'd like to have offices in multiple states, mainly the states that have a lot of flood insurance. I'm not going to put an office in Wyoming, but Texas and Florida and North Carolina and all the areas that have a lot of flood insurance. I'd like to grow because we have clients across the country, but I'd like to have satellite offices to where we can really help those people in those areas as opposed to them just randomly finding us.
And it doesn't matter where they're at right now.
Right.
They can call you up, and then whether they're in Texas or Arizona or wherever they're at, you can help them out.
Correct. I've got clients in California, Texas, Puerto Rico, anywhere FEMA works, we work.
All right, and you can give them a call at 800-561-0396. 800-561-0396. So Brad Hubbard, thank you so much for being with me on the program
Thanks,
today.
Jamie. Appreciate it.
Owner and civil engineer with National Flood Experts, where they can help get your home out of a flood zone if it's above that base flood elevation. Again, a lot of errors on the FEMA maps because FEMA looks at homes on a community level and not on an individual level. So they get in there and they look at your home individually. They report it to FEMA. They got an error on their map, and he gets those homes eliminated from needing flood insurance. NationalFloodExperts.com, 800-561-0396. You've been listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.